Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Capital City Matters. I'm John Landwehr. I used to be mayor of Jefferson City, and this used to be a program that we used for a lot of local community news and events and personalities. What we've done is moved into more of a mode where we think of ourselves as the capital city and our statewide focus. And what we've done the past few shows, I think with some success, is we've invited some statewide leaders and people who are making important decisions for the entire state right here in Jefferson City, and we've highlighted them and asked them to come over and tell us what's going on in their offices. My co-host is Elizabeth Hoffman. Elizabeth is a student here. She's my co-host and a producer. She produced the show. Elizabeth, thanks for tagging along again.
Thank you.
And our special guest today is Attorney General Koster. Mr. Koster, thank you for coming by today.
It's good to be here.
The Attorney General's office, I'm an alumnus of the office. I started out practicing law there, and it's got a great tradition. Your office does all kinds of different things, and we don't have enough time to talk about them all. But your reputation in the community is very good. A lot of your lawyers and your staff people are really vibrant members of the community, and we appreciate you and having that office there.
Thanks. Well, we couldn't do any of it without having good personnel on board. And we've got about 150 attorneys who really do extraordinary work for the people of the state. They don't get a lot of recognition all the time, but they play an incredibly meaningful role in the lives of people in many unseen ways.
You have a civil division and a criminal division. You practice almost every aspect of the law that I can imagine.
There are actually 8 different divisions, and they go from consumer protection to prosecution. The Attorney General's office, interestingly, though it doesn't have a lot of original criminal jurisdiction the way the local prosecutor here in Cole County does, or local prosecutors around the state, we get referrals in from all over the state. So many, in fact, that we've become the third or fourth largest prosecutor's office in all of Missouri. Right now, as we speak, we have 64 open homicide cases. 64 folks whose lives around Missouri have been stripped from them too soon. And we are out in the various jurisdictions around Missouri making sure that those killers are put behind bars.
Sometimes you do some things that are very timely and cutting edge and related to national trends. And Elizabeth has done some research on something that your office is heavily involved in, and it's related to the national mortgage crisis.
Yes, the national mortgage settlement, not everybody is aware of what it is, and I'm hoping you can kind of explain that to us and give us some details about it.
The national mortgage settlement obviously emanates from the mortgage crisis itself. And 50 states were involved. There was over a year-long negotiation that occurred in Washington. A lot of the intricate negotiations was at the Housing and Urban Development offices up in Washington, D.C. And the big banks came in. So Bank of America, Ally Financial, Citigroup, Wells Fargo. The 5 biggest banks in the nation were there at the negotiating table. And the attorneys general from all over the country were concerned that people had been run roughshod over by the banks, that bank documents that needed to be there when foreclosures were occurring were actually absent, and that this robo-signing scandal had really permeated a lot of the mortgage market throughout the country. And just to take a second on that, the robo-signing scandal, people will recall from about a year ago, was these banks had hired 20-year-old kids, basically, to sit in signing rooms and go through mortgage documents and sign them as though they were bank vice presidents. They were actually signing other people's names. And then notaries would come in and notarize those documents as though those 20-year-old kids were actually bank vice presidents. And then the documents themselves were taken all over the country and put into the land title system, into the recorder's offices, as though they were real. This left these 5 banks, and actually all the banks who are big in the mortgage market, in a lot of trouble. It led to a situation where we were able to negotiate $25 billion nationally and about $200 million for the people of the state of Missouri to begin to help ameliorate or take steps forward in making the mortgage crisis a little bit more easy to deal with here in the state of Missouri. So we've moved the money into a number of different categories. We're going to help people who have been foreclosed upon themselves. We're going to take about a $40 million cash payment and alongside the governor move that into the state's higher education budget. We've got a gaping hole in the state's higher education budget, and so we're taking $40 million from that settlement and giving it to the legislature to appropriate, hopefully to help education in the state. We're going to help mortgage owners who have fallen behind in their payments, and we're going to help mortgage owners who are current in their payments but whose houses are underwater, where they owe more money than they actually have in equity in the house. And in a variety of ways over the next several months, we're going to try to make these folks' lives a little better.
Okay. And just like last week, your office had assistants visit every county in the state to try to explain this better to the citizens. How effective was that? Well,
the $200 million that's coming to the state of Missouri won't just stay here if we don't use the money. The program is going to last for about 2 years, and it will start in a couple of weeks here as soon as the settlement documents are finalized in Washington, D.C. And then we'll have about 2 years to work with this $200 million. If we don't use the money, it goes to California and Illinois and other places around the country where it will be used. So part of our job is to get the word out around the state that people need to participate because they've been hurt in the state, and the Attorney General's office is there to help them. So we had town hall meetings in 114 different communities around the state over just a 4-day period. Think about we actually had 118 meetings because in some of the larger counties we had a morning and an evening meeting. And so in Kansas City and St. Louis, it was heartbreaking. You'd have standing room only crowds of people who are on the verge of losing their homes. Some of the smaller rural communities, very few people showed up. We think that there's still economic pain there, but we think that, that sometimes in a community where everybody knows everybody else, attending those meetings reveals a little too much about one's financial situation. And so, but the important thing is that we're doing our best to get the word out so that people know that there's at least one avenue where they can find relief. And
how do these people, they register? That's how they get the assistance?
There are a couple places at the office that they can go through. They can go through our website, which is AGO, that stands for Attorney General's Office, but it's just the AGO.mo for Missouri.gov, AGO.mo.gov, and there's a big button there right in the website they can press and register. We also have set up a hotline for them to call, and there are hotline operators that are on call during the business day all week long, and that is 855-870-7676. And so people can approach the office in one of two ways: get registered so that when the documents are done and the process of moving this $200 million begins, that they are registered and ready to go, and we're there to help them.
And what kind of a time frame are we talking about as far as the assistance that's going to come?
We think that the program will last between 2 and 3 years, but when you have money like that and people who are in need, it won't be surprising if the money goes at a relatively good pace. So I would not say that there's a rush to get registered with the office, but I think that people should, if you're interested in participating in the program, if your mortgage is held by Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, or Ally, then contact our office and let us help you.
Okay. And what is the website? If they do have more questions, they should go to your site?
AGO.mo.gov.
Okay. Did you have any questions about the settlement?
Who will actually administer, once you get people signed up, who will actually administer the funding, the qualifications, the approvals?
It depends on the portion of the program. The banks will apportion some of it. They're going to make some determinations on homeowners who are current but underwater and homeowners who are behind. If you have been foreclosed upon by one of the major banks, there's not really a determination to be made. That's an automatic. And those people are going to get about a $2,000 check in the mail from one of these 5 banks. And then with the $40 million that we're moving over to the General Assembly, the Appropriations Committee in the Senate and the Budget Committee in the House are going to take care of that work.
Good.
Well, along with providing assistance for our mortgages, the Attorney General's office does much, much more. When we come back from our break, we'll talk with Mr. Koster about the other areas they look out for Missourians. We'll be right back.
Lead paint poisoning affects over 1 million children today. If your home was built before 1978, call or log on.
Welcome home, man.
Welcome back. We're privileged to have Attorney General Chris Koster with us today. And John, you have looked into the healthcare a little bit, and maybe you can take us further into that.
Sure, just a little bit. We're all aware, and this is a tape program, but I believe by the time our viewers view these segments, the Supreme Court will not yet have decided the national health care question. Mm-hmm. But your office has been a little bit involved in that. And first I'll point out, you personally argued before the Supreme Court.
I did argue up there on Halloween Day, as a matter of fact.
Did you have to dress up, or?
No, only there is a tradition that you wear a morning coat, so a longer coat, if you are a member of the President's Solicitor General's office. But if you are a private attorney, no, you go in a normal suit. But it is it's quite an experience for a lawyer, and my mom was there. Every time I'm asked the question about the experience, I always think about my mom being in the audience behind me, and what a big deal it was for her to see her son have a chance to do that.
On the healthcare legislation, however, that's a burning topic at this point. It was just argued within the last few days. Lots of news coverage about the actual oral argument, but I think most of us attorneys would concede that the actual oral argument is kind of the icing on the cake. Most appellate judges will decide the cases based on the briefs. I'm an advocate of a good oral argument, but your office did something with regard to the national health care issue.
Right.
You didn't argue the case, obviously, but your office was able to participate actively. How was that accomplished?
Well, we filed what was called an amicus brief, which is essentially a document to the court articulating the state's position and advocating that it move in a certain direction. There were 37 states that filed in the case that was argued down in Atlanta. That was the big case that I think most people are familiar with. That was the big case where 26 states sued. 37 states became active in that Atlanta case, and now that Atlanta case has gone up to the U.S. Supreme Court. 27 of those states were against the Health Care Act. And they said not only is the mandate unconstitutional, but that the entirety of the law, therefore, must come down. 10 states were completely in favor of the president's proposal. They said that the mandate is constitutional, and therefore the entirety of the law should stand. Missouri wanted to take a more nuanced position, and I did not feel comfortable, frankly, in either camp. I personally believe that the mandate takes the Commerce Clause past its constitutional footing. Said more directly, I think the mandate's unconstitutional. But I also believe that Supreme Court precedent allows the Supreme Court to carve off the offensive portion of the Affordable Care Act and allow other portions of the law to stand. So I am in favor of severance. We put an amicus brief in the 11th Circuit on that issue, and of all the states, the 37 states that the 11th Circuit was dealing with, Missouri was not only the only state that took that position, but the only state that the 11th Circuit agreed with. Now that case has gone to the Supreme Court. We filed similar briefs up with the U.S. Supreme Court. And I'm actually, getting back to the point you were making about the oral arguments being important. I'm enough of a legal nerd, and I'm interested enough in this case because it's a big deal, and it's going to be a big deal in the elections coming up, I think, in November, that I have listened to all, I guess, 9 hours of the oral arguments, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays of last week. And then I've listened to the severance argument, which is the third day, twice, because I think that there's a lot of interesting tea leaves to read about where the various judges are going. And so what is about to occur is going to be, I think we're going to be looking at some 5-4 decisions. Have you been following the case yourself?
A little bit, and I've heard the same thing. 5-4 maybe could go either way, which is interesting because you've argued at the Supreme Court. I've not. I've argued at the Missouri Supreme Court, but not at the U.S. Supreme Court. They're all smart folks,
Right.
but the old saying, they put their pants on one leg at a time. I don't know about the women, but they're all smart, but there are a lot of smart people in that room.
Right.
And it's just interesting that you would have these nine people deciding, as you say, an absolutely watermark decision in the history of constitutional law.
Right, and there were a lot of analogies that were used during the arguments, and the issue comes down to if you can force, in my mind, the issue is synthesized in different people's brains in different ways. In my mind, this is how I synthesize it. If the administration, if the Congress can force you to buy insurance, then the next step, the justices were bringing up different analogies, like, well, then maybe the Congress can force you to buy a cell phone, or the Congress can force you to eat broccoli. But the more incremental step and the more natural step is if they can force you to buy health insurance, then they can force you to go get an annual checkup. And if they can force you to get an annual checkup, then they can force you to have certain tests run every year. And each of those, that is the natural progression of this healthcare debate. And in my mind, the founding fathers had every expectation that the U.S. Congress would never be able to say to you or I that you have to go get certain procedures done with your doctor every 12 months or you will be penalized. I believe that we are going to find the case law supports that, and it looks like Justice Kennedy, unless he's given a head fake, it looks like Justice Kennedy is moving in a conservative direction, which could lead to a 5-4 decision against the mandate.
Something as intimate as our health care, the next most intimate thing, I think, would be our cell phones. As a society, we can't live without them. Your office has been working on something that bothers all of us, and that are calls from 8:30 at night about some issue on our home phones. Elizabeth, you've looked into the no-call issue and whether we can make that apply to cell phones. Right.
I was just going to say that there's nothing more aggravating than sitting down with your family at dinner and the telephone rings and it's a telemarketer. There are 2 million phone lines that are on the no-call list right now?
Right about 2 million phone lines. Right now, Missouri's no-call list applies to landlines only. And Governor Nixon was involved in the passage of this law right about 2000. So the law is about 12 years old. And Governor Nixon has a good line he uses out on the stump that he says that he's been able to do more to save the dinner hour in the state of Missouri than any public official in history. And there's no doubt that the no-call list is incredibly popular. And the fact that almost 2 million Missourians have signed up on it and expect it to work and expect it to save the dinner hour is certainly evidence of how popular it is. increasingly, folks have demanded that cell phones be placed on that no-call list, and that's not allowed right now in the state of Missouri. We've advocated for it year after year. It has gotten tangled up for some reason in the Missouri House for several years. But this year, finally, there seems to have been some dawn that has emerged over in the General Assembly on the issue, and members of both parties in both chambers now want to see cell phones put on the no-call list. And we think we're finally going to get success on that area. When that occurs, I think that we're going to see another 2 million phone lines come on to this list that is administered by the state and protected by the Attorney General's office. And what we do then is take complaints from people who feel that the no-call list has been violated on their landline, and hopefully after August of this year on their cell phone. And we go after these folks, hold them accountable, and increasingly protect the privacy that Missourians are asking for.
And that's good news. Just yesterday I was driving and got a call on my cell phone from an unknown number. I went ahead and answered, and sure enough, it was someone wanting to do a survey with me. You know, and that can become a hazard.
You know,
being
I'm in law enforcement, so my line is a blocked number. Okay, so when I call, if I were to call you, it would come up as a blocked number myself. But I am increasingly getting calls like this on my private line, and I think that they're just picking numbers randomly out of the air and dialing them for surveys and to sell things and whatnot, and it's irritating. I know that when cell phones are put on the no-call list, mine will be among the first that gets signed up.
Don't blame you one bit. For those Missouri residents that aren't on the no-call list as of now, how can they register to be put on that?
Well, they should probably call our consumer hotline, and that's 800-392-8222. 800-392-8222, and ask to be directed over to the no-call department, and we'll make sure that they get registered. There's also a place, again, on the website where you can sign up for to be placed on the no-call list now under your landline. And then if this law passes, we're going to be in touch with folks and let them know that we can expand that coverage and they can register their cell phones as well.
That's helpful information. Did you have any other questions?
Well, it just makes me think again about how varied your office is. You know, we think in terms of the Department of Agriculture and Department of Education, and of course you're not necessarily a department, but you're a state silo of authority. The variety of things that your office does is really astounding. Now, you know, Elizabeth talked about the no call. That's a subset of a very robust section of your office called the Consumer Affairs.
Consumer Protection
Consumer
Division.
Protection. And the Chapter 407 is Missouri's omnibus consumer protection statute, and you're the point of the spear on that.
The Attorney General's office has a broad wingspan. Essentially, you're the general counsel. I'm the general counsel for state government. It's a $25 billion organization. There's 60,000 employees that I'm general counsel for. We have 16 cabinet departments, dozens of boards and commissions. We're the back office for 114 prosecutors' offices across the state. And then you're also the lawyer for the General Assembly, the Senate, the House, the governor himself, the other statewide constitutional offices, and you are there to protect not only the statutes of the state, but the protection of the very Missouri Constitution itself. So the reach of the job is enormous, and it can have incredibly beneficial impacts on the lives and the government that we share.
Well, and sometimes you're really the boots on the ground too. For example, the Joplin situation where there was a lot of abuse, a lot of folks coming in trying to take advantage of people. It's my understanding that your office went down physically, opened up, I don't know if you had a tent or a trailer or what you had, but you were present there on site, available to do immediate investigations.
Right, we were down there within May 22nd, 5:40, if I have it right, in the afternoon was the timing of the storm. We were down there within a week. First of all, Governor Nixon deserves incredible respect and thanks for the leadership that he showed. But the entire government, including our office, was down there with essentially a mobile capital within a week and a half, and remain down there to this day. and literally hundreds and hundreds of people who lost everything, including their wallets and their identification cards and all of their mortgage records, would come to us, and we were able to help them through this process. It's getting better now. Joplin is actually moving along quite well in the rebuilding process, but we remain down there and will for the foreseeable future.
Mr. Koster, thank you so much for coming. I'm a fan of the office because that's where I started out practicing law, and I just have the greatest respect for the office. John Ashcroft hired me for some reason, and his attitude was hire young people, don't pay them very much, and they stay for a while and get some experience. And so I just have a lot of great memories from the office. Thank you so much for coming. Elizabeth Hoffman, thank you for putting together another great show. You're about to graduate soon.
Yes.
Join the working class.
That's the plan.
So, well, best of luck with your job prospects. Thank you again for coming.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you again for joining us, and watch for another interesting statewide issue on our next segment. Take care.
Bye.